First, as Sarah was saying, we've got Dr. Frances Holliss. Please come and join us, Frances. She's actually published a book about Beyond Live Work, the architecture of home-based work. So it's absolutely fascinating and appropriate that with your research work that you've done, that it's absolutely opposite to what we're going to be considering today. And in fact, you've been a founder of the Workhome project, which is a not-for-profit organisation set up in April 2020 as a result of the Covid19 pandemic to advocate for good design for home-based work. Frances is an architect at London Metropolitan University. So this is about how do we influence policy making as we've all started working at home as well as getting together like this. So, Frances,
good. Thank you.
Oh, you've got
I've got a microphone here. Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. It's a real honour to be here. So, Andrew Anthony wrote in 2020 that with the exception of COVID-19, working from home was the big story. And of course, it's continued to be the big story in 2021 and in 2022, and it looks set to continue to do this for the foreseeable future. The statistics are really clear. COVID-19 triggered what has been an unexpectedly successful global experiment in home-based work. By the middle of 2020, 37% of the European workforce was working from home full-time. Half the workforce for the United States was. And even in countries like Japan and India, where there's a very strong culture of presenteeism and long working hours in the office, by the end of 2020, 17% of the Japanese were working from home, and I think 50% of the Indian teleworking population were working 1 day a week. An estimated 557 million workers, or 17.5% of the global working population. And it's been popular. Survey after survey has shown that people are happier, healthier, more relaxed, sleeping better, enjoying walking the dog rather than pounding the gym, enjoying spending time with their families, really not missing the commute at all, saving a fortune on not commuting. The TUC have found that of all the people who've worked from home during COVID, 91% want to continue to some extent or another. But the real game changer has been that it's been successful for the employers. And this is because 70% of employees have been found to be equally or more productive working from home. And so suddenly working from home makes good business sense. And there are obviously really serious ramifications in terms of overheads and the potential for reducing the size of companies' property portfolios. As I'm sure you've all read, there are a variety of different responses. Some companies immediately moved to a completely remote model, realizing they didn't need to have a central office at all, and that their employees were working really effectively and well online. Others took the completely reverse response and thought the whole thing was a total aberration, and they wanted all their employees back in the office full-time as soon as it was safe to do so. But the vast majority have adopted a hybrid model, mostly 2 or 3 days a week in the office or at home. And this has huge implications for the way that we inhabit, conceptualize, plan and design our buildings and our cities, and of course our transport systems. I'm not going to talk about transport, by the way, being here. Just warn you that. But of course, this isn't anything new. Before the Industrial Revolution, almost everyone worked from home or lived at their workplace, often in buildings that were specifically designed to accommodate the dual function, like these little weavers' houses with their big upstairs windows to maximize the light that falls on the loom. And it wasn't just at the scale of the building. Cities also were organised to accommodate home-based work of all different sorts. People from all different social sectors worked from home, and their work was accommodated, and in particular the work of the working class was accommodated in the nooks and crannies of the city. But for the last 120 years, more or less, cities have been planned and designed around functional zoning, and most buildings conceived as monofunctional, with work and home systematically separated at both the building and the urban scales. So this increasingly looks like a paradigm shift. Working from home emerges as a mainstream rather than marginal working practice, with potential benefits to the individual, the family, the neighbourhood and the city, the economy, and in helping to mitigate against global warming. And so ways need to be found to reintegrate home and work. But substantial parts of our cities, our transport systems and our economy have actually been built around the commute. So this raises really major challenges. Adapting buildings and cities, transport and governance system, because basically having separated the two out really systematically, we then adopted silos. So home and work are organised completely differently in terms of our governance systems. This new reality presents the biggest urban challenge, I would say, since Howard's Garden City idea was published. But it also presents a really major opportunity. A particular challenge and opportunity emerges in relationship to social and spatial justice and home-based work. The statistics are really stark. By mid-2020, when most middle-class people were working from home full-time, safely out of the way of the pandemic, only 1 in 5 working-class workers was. And the infection and death rates reflect this. Let's look at these statistics. If we look at the chart on the left, we see what we would expect to see, which is that people on low incomes work from home much less than people on higher incomes. But look at the chart on the right. This is a chart of who would like to work from home according to their income. And look at what a leveler it is. Everyone would like to work from home at least part of the time. And this is because home-based work offers the same benefits to the individual, the community, the economy, and the environment, no matter what the social status. And the central benefit that emerges from the research is that working from home gives people more control over their lives. And everyone likes that, no matter what they earn, what their job is, what their social status is. So the received wisdom is that the working class can't work from home. Recent research shows that not even 40% of jobs in the United States or in Norway can actually be performed from home. But if we dig a bit deeper to the central question behind the Norwegian study, we find it says, can this type of job be performed from a home office? And what happens if you research home-based work is you find that at the moment, people are thinking very much about the image on the left, the person sitting working at their laptop, but actually, the other two images are very common as well. The joiner, the childminder. People work from home in a very wide range of different occupations. Catherine Hakim, a sociologist at the London School of Economics, found in 1998 there is no occupation in the labour force that is not carried out from home as well. Working from home is far more prevalent in a much wider range of occupations than is generally acknowledged. A study in 2017 of 2 English villages, home-based work in 2 English villages, found 44 different occupations, including these ones on this list. And if you read the list, you can see that most of them can't be carried out from a home office. And so this undermines our understanding of the received understanding of what home-based work is. At the moment, people are completely focused on teleworking employees, but actually it's much, much broader. And sociologists obviously need to segment what they research, but as an architect, I'm interested in space and buildings and cities, and so everyone who works from home is of interest. Behind this list of home-based occupations lies a little-known fact, and that is that more than 95% of UK businesses employ less than 10 people, and most of them are run from their owners' homes or have been at some time. People think of home-based work as pin money, housewives' pin money. This sector of the economy, this sector of the working population contributes a third of all employment, a fifth of turnover, and I think it was something like £314 billion to the economy in 2015. But contemporary housing, as a result of widespread disapproval of home-based work at the beginning of the 20th century, contemporary housing is generally designed to models that prevent people from working from home. And this is particularly the case in social housing, where there are really serious obstacles. The middle class tend to accommodate their home-based work through under-occupation. People have a spare bedroom, they have an underused dining room, they have a disused garage, or they have space at the bottom of the garden to build a home office. But the less privileged don't have this option, and particularly in social housing tenants, where minimal space standards managed through tenancy agreements that still, unbelievably, often prevent home-based work, sometimes still prohibit it, allocations policy that make it nearly impossible, and a bedroom tax that actually penalises it. And so the statistics on work, I mean, obviously, this isn't the only factor, but households in social housing are twice as likely to be out of work as private renters and 4 times as owner-occupiers. And this is an intersectional issue because it disproportionately affects people of colour. So what is the future for the city centre in the wake of the Covid-19 pandemic? This was quite a question to be asked. It's like, And of course the answer is, I don't know. I can't possibly know. This is a time of enormous uncertainty. But of course what we do know is that working from home during COVID has been more prevalent, persistent and popular than predicted. And this has major social, economic and environmental implications globally. What happens now will depend on many factors, but political and policy decisions will be key. An opportunity emerges to right a 100-year-old wrong, which has been the systematic exclusion of working-class home-based work from the city. Howard Davis introduces the idea of inclusive urbanism in his book, Working Cities, and he says, ideally, people should be able to act in their economic lives in ways that suit them best, and cities should be physically arranged to help remove constraints that prevent them from doing so. This is inclusive urbanism. Cities thrive when all people have the chance to be included. People of different ages, economic levels, genders and gender orientations, physical abilities, ethnicities, religious affiliations, education levels, and occupational interests. One of the immediate challenges and opportunities created by the increase of home-based work and decrease in commuting is the under-occupation of existing office buildings. This slide shows the dramatic drop in weekday journeys to and from the City of London. From April 20, the sort of precipitous drop at the beginning of the pandemic, and you can see it's still nowhere near back to what it was. This slide shows UK offices to be currently occupied at around a quarter of their capacity. I couldn't believe it when I saw this. It means they're 75% empty. It's Financial Times data, and so it's absolutely true. But this is a staggering thought that, oh, right. Fair enough. Well, it impresses me. But it's a staggering statistic. Our offices buildings, on average, are 3/4 empty, and this has been fairly static for the last 3 months. It rises to just 1/3 on the peak working days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. And this graph shows a similar drop in the United States, and it contrasts it with a near return to normal in the sports, hospitality, and airport security sectors. City centres will, as a result, for absolute certain, have surplus office buildings, and they will need to reinvent themselves. Primarily designed as places to go to work and to visit, they currently lack residents. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. A major opportunity opens, therefore, for the development of buildings and neighbourhoods designed specifically around the fine-grained mixed use of home-based work. With the potential to be reinvigorated as third places where local creative activity could be stimulated, they also offer the potential for creative collaboration between commercial, property companies and housing organisations to provide the non-standard spaces in which working class and particularly blue-collar, home-based work can be carried out. The challenge now is to start to plan and design for a new culture of living and working in which people feel confident about working from home openly without fear of reprisals from the authorities. Because what the research shows that before the pandemic, most people worked from home covertly, either because they feared they were breaking some regulation or other, or because they actually were breaking some regulation or other. So this is a time of uncertainty. Standard housing and commercial products have been designed around the average user. The sector knew exactly what a home and what an office was. But post-COVID, there's much less certainty. What is a home when people want to work in it in a wide range of different occupations? And what is an office building when it has been shown clearly that work can be carried out just as, if not more, effectively from home? Designer Casey Climbs, I want to introduce, he's a design researcher. He was a city planner and a data analyst for Young Gale, and he's got some extremely interesting ideas about design paradigms. So he calls for systemic resilience through diversification. He suggests we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket, and obviously we have done. We have a basket that's got housing in it, we've got a basket that's got offices in it, and actually we need something different now. So he introduces something he calls design for emergence, which I think can equally be characterised as design for uncertainty. And he characterises it as an evolution of past and present design paradigms. He starts with high modern design, which gave the designer control and assumed that he, almost always a he, had the necessary knowledge to come up with buildings and cities that people needed. It then moved to user-centered design, which is basically where we are now, which assumes still that the designer has control, but it also assumes that the user has some essential knowledge, and therefore it involves lengthy consultation processes. But what Casey Climbs has come up with is this idea of design for emergence, design for uncertainty, in which it assumes that the user has knowledge, but it also gives the user some control over the design process. So how do we design for uncertainty? How do we do this? To start with, this sounds like a contradiction in terms, but one of the central findings of 20 years research into the architecture of home-based work has been that one size absolutely doesn't fit all, and that there are these four variables: the occupation, the nature of the household, the space available, and the personality of the home-based worker. And if you take the senior social policy researcher who has two small children, and you contrast her spatial and urban needs with those of the single sculptor making vast construction out of rusty steel, you can see that actually to find a common denominator is extremely difficult. So how do we design a space or a building that could be home and workplace to a wide variety of different people working in different occupations and in a radically different sort of households? So over time, a set of principles have crystallized. And what I'm going to do is discuss these in the context, slightly eccentrically, since we're talking about cities, I'm going to discuss them in the context of a single exemplary building that was completed earlier this year. This building is proudly designed for working class home-based workers in Barking. It consists of a dozen affordable studio apartments, and by that I mean apartments that incorporate studio space, not bed-sitters that have a kitchen in the bedroom, arranged on 4 floors above a ground floor studio community space and a working yard next door. It's the child of a passionate 3-sector creative collaboration between the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, arts charity Create London, and the private architectural practice Apparata. A piece of ingenious lateral thinking lies behind the funding model. Barking and Dagenham have basically invested their community arts budget in the building fabric. And the inhabitants, in effect, barter part of their week's work to curate and deliver the community arts programme in return for rents that are a third cheaper than they should have done and free working space on the ground floor. So this is a remarkable building to exist at all, really. The economics of it are extremely unusual. So the first principle that buildings designed for uncertainty need to be spatially generous. English housing is the smallest in Europe, and it's a basic fact that when we work in our homes, they need to be bigger. It's just very straightforward. So here, the architects made another big lateral leap. Realising that UK housing layouts are often dictated by fire constraints, they collaborated with fire expert Beryl Menzies, who'd been involved in writing the fire regs. And their radical solution was to place fire escape balconies on the front and on the back at each level of each of the apartments. And what that did was it freed up all the inside space. I mean, they didn't need any corridors. And that, in effect, gave each apartment an extra 7 or 8 square metres to play about with. And a piece of work I did last year, a secondary analysis of my 20-year data set showed that actually 6 square metres is a sort of critical moment. If you have 6 extra square metres, it makes all the difference to being able to, on top of the nationally described space standards, to being able to work in your home. So that's the first principle. The second principle is flexibility and adaptability. In this case, a largely perimeter-based structure allows a high degree of both flexibility and adaptability. Party walls between each of the 3 apartments on each level have what the architects call soft spots in them, which can be broken through. So you can see in this picture large double doors that actually connect 3 apartments to each other, opening up potential for co-living, for shared childcare, for family, large extended families, for co-working. And in fact, the 3 households that have gone into, the first ones going into these 3 apartments are collaborative theatre and dance practitioners. In addition, all the internal walls can just be taken out. And so where they start with 2 enclosed rooms, these can be added to, they can be removed, they can be reconfigured as people want. So what the result of this is that each household has agency to design the spaces that they require and to change them as their needs change. So this aligns with Casey Klein's giving the users agency to design the spaces that they need. The third principle is free to use collective space. One of the now clearly understood disadvantages of working from home is social isolation. And in this building, all the circulation spaces, workspace and yard, stairways, landings and access courtyards are designed to be inhabited and to provide multiple places for inhabitants to meet each other, thereby reducing the likelihood of social isolation. And the final principle involves visibility of the work. A less well understood disadvantage of home-based work involves the issue of occupational identity. When we dress up and we go out to work, we leave our home, we get onto public transport and we enter a highly visible workplace, our sense of who we are in the world is reinforced by our surroundings and our colleagues. This can be really difficult to achieve when you work from home, and it can cause really serious problems for people. These sorts of problems are less likely to happen if the work, and therefore the worker, is visible to neighbours and to passers-by. Back to our office buildings. So there are some principles for a building that has been purpose-built. And you can see that the spaces that that building includes can be residential. They could also be entirely workplace. They could be any kind of combination between the two. Spatially generous, 2.8 floor to ceiling heights. Nothing has a domestic scale, and it all is open to be used in a very wide variety of different ways. So coming back to our central offices, how can we approach working with these to turn them into spaces that meet the needs, the very wide range of different needs, new needs that have emerged as a result of these changes in our working practices. And I want to flag up the work of Lacaton and Vassal, Pritzker prize-winning architects who work with existing buildings. They work in an extremely unusual way. They believe in the importance of working with the buildings. They say 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 already exist today. So working with existing buildings is absolutely crucial to their philosophy. Their project, transforming 530 social housing units in the 1960 slab box in Bordeaux, offers an inspiration for what could be done with the empty office buildings that threaten to blight our city centres. Believing generosity is essential in architecture and that buildings should be renovated, not demolished, and that working with existing buildings makes economic as well as environmental sense, Lacaton and Vassal say, a restorative architecture that is at once technological, innovative, and ecologically responsive can be pursued without nostalgia. Moving away from the idea of the conventional master plan, they believe in urban planning for the whole city that starts from the smallest piece. This is very radical. No big maps with coloured blobs on them. Starting from the smallest piece and then working step by step up to make all of them, to make the whole city. There is immense potential scope for innovation in our city centres and for the home-based work-driven 24-hour inhabitation of such repurposed buildings to bring new life to streets and local economies. It is possible to imagine social spaces, access courtyards and fire escape routes that clip on to office facades, activating building, street and neighbourhood, and commercial interiors reconfigured flexibly and adaptably to interweave a wide range of different sorts of workspace and home. And this scheme that's just shown here is a literally clip-on winter gardens that extend each of these 1960s, poor quality, huge slab blocks of social housing. Each unit is extended by this very beautiful space, improving the quality of life of the individual and of the community. I'll finish just with 2 quotations. A sustainable building is not one that must last forever, but one that can easily adapt to change. And the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it's something that we make and could just as easily make differently. Thank you.